Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to the Castle Dracula podcast. On this podcast, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and all-around awesomeness. And this week, we kick off the Stephen King retrospective with a movie that is all of the above. Salem's Lot, the original 1979 3-hour TV miniseries starring David Soul and James Mason. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing adventure Triumph of Death in hardback and ebook from HarperCollins. With me are Drew Edwards, the creator of the long-running horror webcomic Halloween Man, which you can find at HalloweenMan.com. Say hello, Drew.
Not only must I say hello, Drew, I have to say happy birthday to the deceased, but nonetheless awesome, Johnny Ramone.
Happy birthday, Johnny Ramone. Outstanding. Tony Salvaggio, creator of the new manga Psychon Book 3 from Right Stuff, and also from Tokyopop, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, and writer of comics like Clockworks from Humanoid. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy. And
with color commentary from the one and only attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello, darling.
Hello, darling. Okay. Directed by Tobe Hooper of, Poltergeist and Chainsaw Massacre fame, and starring David Soul and James Mason, the plot of Salem's Lot revolves around a writer who returns to his home and discovers the citizens are turning into vampires. According to Wikipedia, because I've just come to the point where I lift these synopses from Wikipedia, it combines elements of both the vampire film and the haunted house subgenres. And I have read the book Salem's Lot, so I'll be able to talk about it a little bit from the perspective of book fans. Tony has read a lot of Stephen King. I don't know if you've read it. So a lot of us have read it. Maybe some of us have seen the remake.
I have also read the book, but it is.
You've read the book? Good.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Okay. So all right. So I want to get into this. This is a movie near and dear to my heart, but I want to hear everybody's first impressions. Let's go. Tony, Julia, Drew, and then me. Tony, give me your first impressions of Salem's Lot, 1979.
It's been a really long time since I've read the book, so I was trying to compare them, but I got sidetracked on that. I like the movie. I can't remember if I saw it when it originally came out or not. I don't think I was allowed to, if I remember correctly. I may have seen part of it, actually, now that I think about it.
With damn good reason, let me say.
It's got a lot of, TV stuff in it, where it's definitely TV effects and kind of holds and stuff like that. But it's pretty cool. I think it's a pretty good adaptation. I think it's one of the more, it's closer to the book than a lot of adaptations. I like it a lot. It's got a lot of great, and tons of people where you're like, oh, man, if you haven't seen it in a while, you're like, what? He's in it? She's in it?
Right.
Cool,
right.
Yeah. And also sports some pretty awesome late 70s leading into the 80s duds.
There are some awesome duds. There's some awesome hair, boy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Julia, I don't know if you'd ever seen this movie before. So tell me, lay it on me, Salem's Lot.
Well, I have to say, for me, there was a lot of build-up. I've never seen it before, so I felt like there was so much build-up from you guys and from other people that I expected it to be just this amazing movie. And really, it was okay. It was good. There were some good scenes, but I wouldn't say it was just great because most I found, even though it was really long, I found there was a lot of things I really wished it would have done that it didn't do and get into. So it sort of left me wanting more, but it was interesting, and there was a few scenes that were just terrifying.
All right, so you're going to get into, I assume, in this, what it is that you would have wanted to see more of. Mr. Drew, what do you think? Salem's Lot, your top line.
I don't have an objective opinion on this movie because it's part of a rather offbeat family tradition in our household in which every year after the day after Thanksgiving we would eat leftover Thanksgiving food and watch a 3-hour Salem's Lot miniseries which we would rent from the local video store. So this movie is a big part of my childhood. So I while completely acknowledging that from an objective standpoint, as a film fan, I can say yes, there's a lot of flaws here, but Drew the person is just like, I love this movie. I love it. I love it with all its blue Nosferatu goodness. And, yes, it's extremely late 70s, early 80s, but I don't care because the datedness of it just makes it that much cooler. So I love Salem's Lot. That is all.
Oh, that's outstanding. All right. Me too. It's. I know I end up pretty much liking everything, but for different reasons. But I can absolutely see this being a tradition because it is deeply comforting in a way to me that basically all of these big TV adaptations of Stephen King books I find very comforting. Usually because they always take place in these beautiful little small towns. So there's always lots of leaves and trees. These always feel like great worlds to run into. So top line feeling about this, I did read Salem's Lot probably, well, at least I did read it this year. It's been many months. The movie is very close, to it. I thought it's a great adaptation, one of the best adaptations of a Stephen King novel ever. And I would actually put it neck and neck with The Shining, honestly. I think it's quite close to the book, and there are at least 3 terrifying scenes in here. There are great scenes in this movie. And, the Old Testament is a good movie. A good movie has 3 great scenes and no bad ones. There are almost no bad scenes here, You can not like some of the effects, although I think some of the effects are just nightmare-inducing. You can think that the clothes are silly, but there are no scenes that make you want to throw the movie down and not watch it anymore. This is a good movie. Okay, so let's get into it. We open up Salem's Lot with a prologue where we find our hero, who is David Soul, and he is on the run apparently in Guatemala, and in a made-up town apparently called Quimica, or Himica, I guess, and he's hanging out with this blonde teenage boy that looks a lot like David Soul, and David Soul basically looks down. They're refilling their holy water, so we get the impression that they have some reason to be refilling bottles of holy water. And David Soul's bottle of holy water glows to let him know that some evil is nearby. So this, having just said there are no bad scenes, but this is a weird way to start this movie, don't you think? I mean, it
was strange.
It's very odd.
Have you ever had that?
Go ahead.
And have you ever had that in any other of your vampire books or movies where holy water glows?
No, that's a new concept to me. I had never seen that before. Where the holy water acts like the Highlander quickening buzz. That was new.
Or the swords.
Drew,
or the swords in The Hobbit.
Yes, that's right. That's absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah, that is. I mean, hey, that'd be really cool for vampire hunters.
It is cool, and David Soul looks down and goes, "They're here," and that's the beginning. And then we flash back to the beginning of this movie where we meet our hero, David Soul, who is coming to the little town of Salem's Lot, and bringing us into basically the Stephen King universe. So let's talk first and foremost about the hero of this and the world that he runs in.
Okay, so I have to ask you a question.
Yeah, please, go crazy.
So you and Julia got married really early, so you missed the part where, I like his, hey, I'm a famous writer and I'm coming to town, and he walks in the park and he goes, hey, look at that book. It just happens to be me. I like his whole setup of
Tony, just because he was married to me doesn't mean he didn't have little things, moments like that.
Okay.
He may not have played him out, but he could have potentially had, that's me on that book.
Oh, by the way, hey, do you like the book? And there's that whole thing where he's like, oh, it just happens to be me. What do you think about me? I'm just kind of, I'm just kind of famous, whatever. Just,
you're right.
Me on the back of the book.
He is totally like, whatever, it wasn't that good.
and then he's got the perfect, but he's got not only that, I just wonder how often he uses, because not only that, but he's also got the, my wife died. Oh, that's so sad for you.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, man, for real? That's the card you're playing. But
only in a movie like this,
so.
only, I guess, in the movies does the death of a wife, it's played basically as a line to help you.
No. To be fair, she said, do you still have a wife and do you still have no children? So it's not like he just goes, hey, baby, my wife died.
No, I know that. But
that's true.
But that
he
all
doesn't
plays into
seem all that broken up about it. It seems like kind of an aside.
That actually gets into one of the things I don't like about the movie, which is nobody seems broken up about anything. I mean, nobody has emotional responses to anything in this movie, and I think.
Yeah, that could be direction. That could be.
I don't know. Well, I guess. Okay, good point. Okay, I can take the business of the dead wife. People can compartmentalize. I can totally buy the idea that he's learned to talk about this at a sort of distance, at a reserve.
Yeah, but even like the lady who loses her two sons, I mean, the worst that happens to her is that she faints, and that could have been because she already started getting vampired.
I having gone through some extreme grief of my own,
Yeah.
You hold on to that stuff. I don't know, I have a problem. I would have to say, I side with Julia on this one. They should have made more of a deal out of that.
Well,
especially since he is portrayed as this somewhat haunted man.
Yes.
He's got this dark connection to the Marston house, and he's constantly musing on that, which is like some sort of childhood trauma, but
yes.
Which is probably imagined. And he does not really dealing with something that is certainly a real trauma. It does bother me.
Well, my thing, not to derail from the horror, but he starts out. He goes to the Marston house. He's obviously they do a pretty good job of establishing something's there, but then on the way he goes to the park, and knowing another blonde author. I'm like, all right, I gotta ask Jason about this. This is too funny. All right, Jason,
No, he does. He gets stuff like that every once in a while, where somebody will be like, oh, I have your book in my house or whatever. That happens all the time, but sadly for him, he doesn't get to. Well, as far as I know, he doesn't get to use that in that exact way. But I've actually been present where people have been like, oh my gosh, we've been in a group and they've been like, oh my gosh, we have this book at our house. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, so what can I say? What you're looking at is, I have no comment on any of that. I think you're seeing.
Jason's also a lawyer, by the way.
Yeah, no comment. I played the fifth.
No, but I think what you're seeing is just this really fast storytelling. They have to get him. Basically, he has to get a girlfriend.
And you have to have 3 hours to work with. They don't have to do fast storytelling.
Very well said. So yeah, we got to figure out.
They do have a lot of characters, though.
Yeah, this book is 400 pages long, and sometimes I feel like almost every page is in here, and yet I reread the book, and there are more characters that are left out.
They leave out a lot, and Barlow is very different in the book than he is in the movie.
Yeah, well, let's save Barlow, because that's a major one. But I mean, as Ben, one thing that makes me really happy and that I love about Stephen King stories is that Ben, as a stand-in for Stephen King, just sort of collects a gang, of pals in his little town. He gets a girlfriend right away, and pretty soon, who does he have with him? He's got the teacher that he used to know, and he's got the doctor, and he's even to some extent got the chief of the constable. And by the way, I never watched Starsky and Hutch, so David Soul is not particularly familiar to me. You know, other than that, I was aware of him, and I knew that he had one hit on Billboard. It was called, you know, "Don't Give Up on Us," and he also starred briefly in a Casablanca television series, which lasted like 3 weeks back in, you know, '82 or something.
It
like
would.
That. But well, yeah. I mean, you know, think about this. You're making a Casablanca television series. You're making a TV series based on the great Humphrey Bogart movie Casablanca, and you go, you know, who's Rick? Who here can play Rick? Let's get David Soul to play Rick. That doesn't make any sense at all. I cannot, for the life of me, imagine why somebody said, you know who we want? The blonde guy from Starsky and Hutch. So I don't know.
Take a chance.
But go ahead, Tony.
No, I said we're going to take a chance.
Right.
Well, we know we can't reproduce Casablanca because we can never make it the greatness that it was. So let's make it something completely different. Let's just go.
Well, they did give him dark hair. So there's the extra problem is, of course, not only have they miscast Rick, but now they've also un-David sold him, so that now what do you have? You have the wrong guy. And you've also annoyed all of his fans because they probably wanted to see the guy with these really rather luxurious shoulder-length locks that he's got here. Well, I mean, they're not quite shoulder-length, but
at least
go ahead.
I mean, at least he makes a good vampire hunter.
He does. So yeah, to get back to David Soul in this movie, this is the first that I'm aware of, the first Stephen King writer stand-in character. And this has got to be this writer's favorite literary motif, is the main character who is basically just Stephen King. You know, he's just a
better looking younger Stephen King, but yes.
Yes. That's exactly right. You know, and unmarried. Because by all accounts, Stephen King got married when he was quite young, is still married to the same person, and you know, they've stayed married throughout. There's no talk of any great separations or anything like that. The largest problem they've had is just Stephen King's, you know, occasional bouts with different, you know, just different dependencies that he's dealt with, which is pretty typical of writers. So anyway, he comes to this little town. He's haunted by the Marston House, which is this not necessarily gigantic. It's this sort of Victorian monster that sits on a hill and is situated perfectly so that every house in Salem's Lot can see the Marston House. And Ben is obsessed with it, you know, because of various murders that took place there. And I don't want to take forever, but we start to meet other characters as Stephen King sort of introduces us to this. You know, he sets up essentially a soap opera in the town of Salem's Lot. So before anybody starts dying, and I can imagine Julia watching this, having not seen it before, going, good night, we're meeting a lot of people, because we don't just meet Ben and the teacher that he meets who reads his book and immediately becomes his girlfriend, because who wouldn't? We meet the jealous ex-boyfriend of the teacher, who is Ned Tebbett, who is immediately angry, so that Ben immediately has an enemy. We meet... Oh, yeah. For some reason, we meet George Zunza, who is a trucker who is angry that his wife, Bonnie, is having an affair.
That would be Boom Boom Bonnie to you.
Boom Boom Bonnie is having an affair with Fred Willard, who plays a straight role for once, and does it very well, by the way. And let me see, who else am I leaving out? Oh yeah, okay. We have Jeffrey Lewis. Jeff Lewis, who you may know as a character actor who shows up in a million genre pieces and everything, and he plays the town's go-to handyman, the one guy who is there to do everything. And so,
isn't he the cemetery guy? Isn't he the groundskeeper for the cemetery?
He's the grave digger.
He's a gravedigger, but he's also, hangs out by a fence all day. And I get the impression that Jeffrey Lewis must be like this undocumented Canadian, because he's just hanging out by the fence, and guys roll by and go, "Hey, Jeffrey, $50 if you'll come carry some stuff, but you got to bring somebody else too." And he's like, "Oh, I can do that." So that's what you do in Maine.
Because in Maine, that's who your day laborer is the Canadian.
That's right. Random Canadian.
He's the only one that really attempts to do the New England accent.
Yes, he does. That is absolutely right. That's a good point. You hear him. He does do, and he's really good. Somebody in the chat room goes that Jeffrey Lewis is super scary when he's turned. And let me tell you,
he's a really creepy vampire.
Yeah, he is. He's awesome.
He was very scary. Yes, I mean, when he ends up turning into a vampire later, it was one of the things that gave me nightmares. Let me say, I watched this movie when I was like 9 years old, and because HBO used to play it. HBO used to play a 90-minute version called, Salem's Lot, the movie, which I have not been able to find. Nobody on the internet will tell me what's different about the Salem's Lot, the movie, and so I have no idea. But I was like 9 years old when I saw that thing, and there were all kinds of things in here that just scared me to death. I mean, like, I don't want to get to it just yet, but all the window stuff, the thing with Jeffrey Lewis and his rocking chair, George Zunza didn't scare me with his shotgun. Somehow that made no impression on me at all.
I think that's one of the best scenes in the movie is his confrontation of Fred Willard. And it doesn't involve really any of the vampire stuff, but
no, it's this is when you're
cut out scene.
Yeah, well, and that was in the movie. The differences in the movie. So just for the listener who's having a hard time remembering, well, before all the vampire stuff happens, basically the plot goes like this: George Zunza is hired by Fred Willard, the real estate man. Fred Willard, the real estate man, has sold the Marston house to James Mason, who we'll talk about right after this. And James Mason is moving things into the house and also opening up an antique shop. And he says, I want you to go to Portland. I want you to send a truck to Portland and get this heavy box for me. And George Zunza is the guy with the truck who's going to go, except for that he's not really going to go. He's going to send a couple of other people, and he's going to stick around because he knows his wife is having an affair with Fred Willard, and he's going to confront Fred Willard, which he does with...
two of them. He's going to confront the two of them.
Yeah, and that scene really is quite scary. Yes,
which
George Zunza... Yeah, go ahead.
One of the Stephen King, because that's one thing that King is really good at. There's supernatural stuff going along, but he's really good at the microcosm of especially New England towns,
Yes.
So you're going to get
he's got the beat of the small town down very well. Yeah, his small towns are always in New England, but I mean, as the kid growing up in a small town in Texas, I can tell you all this stuff is very relatable.
And that's why people read it, right? That's why you go to the library and you check out Stephen King books, because I think with a certain amount of people, and why he's so successful is it still resonates. Like, the small town, he's got it down, and I think what makes a Stephen King book a lot of times.
I agree with you.
You have the people in the town are usually as important as the big bad. And you could take out the supernatural, and you would still have some novels. You wouldn't be as strong, but you could still have a drama, or you could take that as a seed and make a drama book without supernatural, and it would still be pretty good.
I just want to take this opportunity to say I want to know why Stephen King obviously doesn't trust antique dealers.
Yeah, exactly. I was watching that just then. I was thinking the same thing.
Needful Things also has a similar evil antique dealer.
Well, maybe the evil ties back. It all ties back to the Dark Tower, and maybe the Dark Tower is sending out random terrible antique dealers with their horrible wares out into the
It's a good point.
First.
I mean, it's a favorite. It's really a favorite motif of his. And in fact, there's a lot of motifs that Stephen King goes back to again and again. Which is funny, considering how readable his books are. He does not mind using the same motif over and over. He doesn't mind. Here's yet another character.
I don't mind. I like Salem's Lot, but I also like Needful Things.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, absolutely. Well, and you know how many times he invented Castle Rock so that he would have a small town that would be a stand-in. But he said in the intro to this, or maybe it was in Danse Macabre, that what Salem's Lot was to him was his attempt to do Peyton Place with vampires. I mean, he kind of started out he wanted to do a modern Dracula, and then as he was thinking about it, he goes, actually, the way to do modern Dracula would be to do Peyton Place and put vampires into it. And Peyton Place, the whole thing was that she just flitted from character to character, and there's just all this sort of unhappiness inside of small towns. And it's funny how much he loves small towns. You can tell there's all this affection for them, and at the same time there's this kind of deep-seated distaste.
Well, I think that comes from, if you're a kid and you live in a small town, you can't help but both, maybe you like the familiarity, but there's always the bright lights, big city aspect to it. So when you go to write about it, especially if you have the proclivities that King has, it's also fun to dig up the dirt and really, really cut it open. And all the nastiness that comes out of that, cutting it open, kind of boils out.
Well, the thing is that with dealing with horror,
exactly,
a small town is better than a big city because you're more cut off.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
You're not going to immediately have like a SWAT team or something like, just send in a SWAT team to deal with the vampires. You're not going to have that. You don't have that out.
There's a sense that everybody's getting picked off and there's nobody left. Whereas in a big city, you have to go through 100,000 people. It's like, well, that's going to be a different kind of movie. That's a disaster movie, not a horror movie. Yeah. Whereas here, it's like, wow, the 12 people that we met are all dead now. It's like, that sucks.
But again, the way, the familiarity, it's definitely a write what you know kind of thing as well, which is
that's absolutely right.
A good thing to do. If you know that, and again, I think that's why he's successful. If people can understand it, even though some things are probably like, if you live on the East Coast, they're probably even more familiar. But in general, you can associate any of that with any small town you've been to, and all the stuff that is under the surface. It's not till you get older and you realize, like, wait, what? So and so was cheating with so and so, and there were that, but that was my friend's dad, and that was his other friend's mom. Like, wait, what? And all of that kind of intrigue that, unless you're old enough, you don't really know it, and it all kind of comes out eventually.
Well, here's an example.
And,
the doctor says to Ben, and this is all different from if you were to make a movie about like a 19-year-old or something. All these characters are full grown except for Mark and his teenage friends. But
Mark is sorry.
Oh no, well yeah, I want to talk about Mark in a sec. But what I was thinking was just the thing with Doctor is he goes, hey, I understand that you and you and Susan, who is Bonnie Bedelia, were out at the lake. Ben is like, I'm sorry, or whatever. I don't know what he thinks he's going to respond there, because this is, Susan's dad asking him about, were you making out with my daughter out at the lake? But the doctor goes, well, lots of people were there, so you do think you could be a little more discreet, don't you? And I thought that was great and so real. So small town.
No, it's pretty awesome.
Well, Drew, what were you going to say about Mark, which is this other character that we meet, which
Mark
is this teenager who's obsessed with...
Mark is also not only a stand-in, I feel, for Stephen King, he's the same horror character we've seen, a lot of other movies he's discussed, where it's the horror fan is somehow more equipped to deal with this than the average person. And that's tremendous wish fulfillment. It's the same thing that's going on in the Fright Night film.
But
thank you for likening it to Fright Night.
That's not wishful. It's absolutely true that if you don't know, that's true for anybody, that if you know what you're dealing with, like if you're a cop, then you know kind of what to expect from somebody breaking in your house more than regular people do. So, if you've got a vampire coming to you and you know about vampires, you have an advantage over the people who have no idea what vampires are, what you do to ward them off.
Oh, it's absolutely accurate. But I mean, as a kid, and I watched this movie, Lord knows how many times as a kid.
Yeah.
I thought Mark was so freaking cool. Because
right.
I was that kid, and I'm sure Tony and Jason were in a lot of respects. That character.
Yeah, believe me, yes, I was.
Oh, and even the drama.
Yeah.
Again, I was like, oh, if anything's tailored towards Jason,
yes,
because he's in drama, like he's seriously in drama.
Yeah.
To the point where his dad's like, all right, man.
Even looks like Jason.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, there's so many things where I was like, this is a perfect Jason movie. Which is
but
cool.
I didn't, it's funny, I didn't think about, I was so young when this movie came out that I didn't think about that, instead, this kid was heroic to me. I was like, but when I was 9, I was just too caught up in how scary everything was.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
there's this great moment now as an adult looking at it, and as a dad, when, and this is also so small town, Mark, the kid, is like, has his models and stuff, and his dad comes in and says, and this is the entirety of their conversation, the dad comes in and goes, Mark, when do you think you're going to outgrow this stuff? And the kid is like playing with one of his models, and he goes, I don't know, soon, I guess. Well, I better fix this. And the dad goes, okay, good night. And he leaves. And I was thinking, good talk. That was...
Yep, that was it. And there's so much actual subtext to that, where it's like, you need to grow up because you're going to be an adult soon.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, Dad, you've been harping on me for a long time, and I fully understand that. But right now, what I really want to do is play with models. And that's the real conversation they're having.
Yes.
But it's like, hey, well, your mom and I think you're good. Yep. Okay, and that's how those conversations, and there's so much, all of that is like, several paragraphs worth of actual conversation, but that's the way that is, depending on how your family is.
I know, it literally was, I think their conversation consists of like 30 words or less. And
that is, by the way, not at all how my family is.
Right.
Not even
my
the tiniest little bit.
Oh, go ahead, Drew.
My dad, I think, any conversations we had, he never really slept, because my dad likes horror movies too. It's about one of the few things we actually do have in common. But so I never got that talk. It was more about like comic books and things like that.
Right.
He was like a little like, oh, well, you're never gonna meet a girl if you're always your nose in a issue of Fantastic Four. That's not cool.
I'm going to hear the male version of that, because we always got you're never going to find a husband.
Yeah.
See, I have to say, my
right.
dad never said anything like that to me. Honestly, this is the truth. My dad got me a copy of the Writer's Market, for selling stories, probably about the same time, that same period when I was like 9 or 10. And I didn't sell anything for another like 10 or 12 years. But, so he was pretty hip. I mean, I got to admit, I did not have this dad in this, at least not, I had these conversations. So there are plenty of ways we're non-demonstrative, and that continues to this day. But he never groused on my weird hobbies.
No, my parents were pretty cool, but to Drew's dad defense, there is a time where that is absolutely true, that you will not get women and girls with
I did not date in my dad's defense, I did not date much in high school.
That and video games, this continued to trend well into college for me, even though I was in a band. So I was doing obviously something wrong. So I can totally.
Yeah, man, you're the band. That's like
currency. I know, and somehow I was single. So, like I said, I did something wrong. I'm not sure what. It all worked out. It's great. Like, I'm extremely happily married and have an even better band now. But yeah.
And you've been married for like 10 or 12 years now.
Yeah,
right?
12 years. So yeah. So it all works out, hopefully. But yes, in your dad's defense, that's certainly a way that can go. especially in a smaller town where there's not the potential for as many like-minded, there's not the weird comic book chick.
I was definitely the weirdest kid in my high school, but that's nothing to do with Salem's Lot.
Right.
Or maybe it does, but...
So what do you guys like? The other thing, man, like, it takes, to Julia's defense, it does take a long time for the vampire stuff to start happening. But when it does,
let's get into
creepy.
Let's get into what should have been cut out of this movie to make it more, so that we can have more time for the vampires. Because that's my thing, is that I really wanted, the floating kid scene is the first terrifying scene. When the kid, there's a kid that's been vamped, has been turned into a vampire, and now he's going to go find his brother to kind of turn him as well. So he floats up at night while the kid's in bed, he floats up to his window, like amidst this really thick cloud of mist, and starts scraping. And by the way, I think that sound of the scraping against the window, it seemed to be, to me, like kind of a nails on the chalkboard kind of sound. And it seems like it's the same sound that once we meet the head vampire later on, that it also is the sound he makes on his own. So anyway, that was an interesting sound effect. But it's just so terrifying to see this kid floating outside the window, just scraping. And it's like, go ahead.
No. Well, okay. That scene, I think, is the one thing that everybody remembers about Salem's Lot, is the floating kid in the window. I mean, it is, and they do it 3 times. So just in case and you never get tired of it. 3 times is just the right number for this, because it even works like a joke. The way jokes work is you have one to freak you out, the second to establish the pattern, and the third that goes differently. But the first 2 of the floating kid in the window, these are scary scenes. And Tobe Hooper, who before this had done what? Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Here he's got this creepy music going, and the young boy who has gone into the woods, and 2 boys go in the woods, one comes out, the other's missing. All right? And that's the first death that happens in Salem's Lot. Well, maybe not the first, but it's like really early. And he wakes up in the middle of the night, there's the music, and there's all this fog, and then outside the window, we're looking right at it, at this big window, floats up this kid in his like powder blue pajamas. And he just sort of floats and taps on the window.
When he has this really creepy white face with like red lips, and the glowing eyes. He's just really, really, really terrifying.
The contacts are really what make it.
Yeah, the glowing contacts.
Those contacts are horrible.
They're horrible.
The contacts are bad. The teeth are freaky. I mean, because he's got these freaky teeth, and that are like elongated.
This is a different. I think people who are used to more modern vampire movies. This is. It's a contemporary setting, but this is not what. This is a much more folkloric version.
I agree with you.
Of vampires.
Yes, traditionally the original vampires would have been very zombie-like.
Down to not being allowed to come in unless they're invited.
That's right. Stephen King's vampires play by the rules, and they at least in this movie, Stephen King's vampires, they can't, they're allergic to crosses. They can't come in unless they're invited, and so this kid has to knock on the window, and if he's going to bite his brother's going to have to open the window and let him come in, And
but also, these vampires are extremely hypnotic. Like all the time when people encounter them, they can't seem to look away. They're drawn towards even the most the kid's in the coffin. The guy jumps in the grave with him. All this. But even the guy's holding a cross and he sees a guy in the rocking chair. And he wants to put the cross up, and he even seems to have problems with that. I think that was a pretty cool element that, anyone who's turned is
well, the idea that they attack their relatives is also something curbed from folklore.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely is. Yeah, traditionally, the original vampires are basically revenants. They're basically zombies who are from your family who are going to come up and attack members of their own family as basically a means of God punishing the family for various bad things.
But they're so grotesque, but they're also hypnotic. Like, these aren't sexy vampires who are like, oh, I'm enthralled, and they're, these are really extremely horrific creatures who also can get you to do almost anything they want you to with, if you stare at them long enough. And I thought that was
they give off a radiation.
They make sense as a predatory animal, the way they're set up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like they radiate this thing, this whammy, that makes you, really prone not to fight them, not to raise a cross, and so forth. Which is why it's so cool that when one shows up at Mark's window, Mark, who at least has a plan to deal with vampires, because he watches all these movies all the time, he is able to raise up the cross, and he certainly doesn't open the window for this.
Well, I love the fact that his cross comes from an Aurora model.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Like any monster fan, has to just their heart has to swell a little bit.
You're right. He is saved by wish fulfillment of an American geek child. Absolutely. He's got these Aurora models that he's been building, and for any of our younger listeners, those are these very easy to build but wonderful models that you can always gussy up with paint and so forth. And they had all kinds of
younger
things.
Younger listeners or women.
Well, yeah, good point. You know what else I discovered that girls had, as a toy that guys had a different version of it. I don't know if girls had anything like Aurora models, but they did have these things called fashion plates, where you would have you put together. Right, you had that, right? Where you scratch at it and then color it and to create a design. We had monster plates. It was the same toy.
Oh man, that thing was awesome. I got so much play between my stepbrothers and I.
Monster plates were awesome. I can't believe I ever got rid of them. I would play with it to this day. I'd be on a conference call and I'd be like, I think I'm going to use a scaly head. That's what I'm.
What I need is a merman superhero.
Yes.
Yes. This conference call needs a mermaid superhero with tentacle feet. The best ever.
Merman.
All right. James Mason is the other guy who has come to town. Basically, 3 people are coming to Salem's Lot. Salem's Lot is a sleepy little town that would probably rock on for another 100 years in its stifling 30-word conversation, adulterous way, until into this town comes Golden Tressed Ben the writer, and James Mason, this antique dealer who's opened up an antique show. And I mean, I love this guy. If I didn't know James Mason already, I would think, where did they find him? Because he's got to be.
So
I don't have any clue how old James Mason is in this movie, but he is.
Well,
so
they
good
say
at this role.
They say the character is 58.
That guy is not 58. I mean, that guy, James Mason has to be, he looks to me to be in his 70s. I might be wrong about that, but...
No, I think you're wrong about that.
How old do you think James Mason is here?
I think 60-ish is about right.
He was born in I found it. He was 70 years old. So there we go.
70?
70.
Okay.
He's 70. But what's amazing is James Mason has this fantastic voice that's so fun to listen to. And he has this way of acting so that every single thing that James Mason ever says sounds ironic. It's as though every sentence that comes out of his mouth, even he's not completely sure if it's the truth, or there's a wrinkle to it that makes it funnier than what you think. So that he is smarter than everybody, and he is more sophisticated than everybody, and I love listening to him sort of argue with the cops, and also look really quite nervous whenever he's thinking about how he's going to pave the way for his business partner, the other owner of the of this antique shop, a guy named Barlow, who hasn't come to town yet for most of the movie. And
I feel like that him and Barlow, like there was a couple in my hometown that everybody knew was gay, but no one talked about it, and everybody was a little freaked out by it because it was the 80s and it was Texas.
Sure.
And I feel like that James Mason is on some level working off this conception, and maybe that's even inherent in right down to what Stephen King was thinking. But like, there's definitely everybody's constantly the way everybody's like, oh, where's Barlow? Where's Barlow? Oh, these two older English guys living in a house together. How odd. And
that's true. But remember, there also used to be a great deal of patience for the gay lifestyle if you kept it at a certain reserve. So, in other words, if you were a confirmed bachelor, but you knew how to let it slide, then everybody, this is at least in the universe that we seem to be dealing with in this fiction. That's what New England is. It's like you can do any old crazy ass thing that you want, as long as you are dignified about it, and don't let anybody know. So, I think you're right that they seem to be sending out the message, and I mean James Mason seems to be sending out the message. Yes, I and my gay lover Barlow are trying to become famous, opening antique shops all through New England. Do you think we'll do well? He says, and that's his cover for the fact that he actually is a ghoul for Barlow, who is a vampire. But I mean, you watch James Mason as he seems to be working through some of the logistics of getting his vampire boss's coffin here, and he looks to me he looked like a man whose job is to deal with nuclear fuel. I mean, he really seems quite worried that this is not going to go right.
Well, I think he's terrified of Barlow.
Yeah.
Well, that, and he's also, I get the impression that he's been, in the same way we had all the Carmilla stuff and her various people, or the now I'm drawing a blank on, a few back with the all the couples in the hotel. You get the idea that Barlow, he's been around a while, and that, his job is to deal with the stuff. That's his big job. He and Barlow get along, but it's up to him to take care of everything.
Well, he's definitely if Barlow is Dracula, he's definitely the Renfield. I mean,
definitely
he's
Renfield.
So much more.
He's so much more elegant.
And he's so awesome. In fact, when I was watching it, and this will only be, and sorry to go on a side for Jason and I, but when we said David Niven for that one Monster Force game we worked on for one of the characters, in fact, now I think we should have said James Mason in Salem's Lot as his voice. Because we had a character in a game that Jason was writing for and I was animating for, and
that's a really good point.
That we wanted to have that kind of very much Straker, persona, and we said
there was Imhotep, right? It was like it was
Kid Anubis, yeah. But they ended up with a way more broad, stupid version of that. Luckily, that game never saw the light of day because it was terrible. But
I'm sad
I wish we would have said Straker, James Mason, because that character embodies everything we wanted to, and I was watching it going, that, and it was in a vampire movie, so maybe they would have gotten it. But anyway.
Do you guys think that Straker is totally human? Because he sure seems strong there at the end when he picks up.
No, he's definitely not human. I mean, he takes quite a few bullets before he goes down.
It just takes a while, huh?
He takes pleasure in what?
I was just saying he does die from gunshots, but it seems to take a really long time.
Yeah.
For an older guy, I mean, he just hoists that other guy up. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that he's some kind of creature.
Oh, and get a load of that. Okay, you want to talk about Tobe Hooper remembering what else? Did anybody
the
else?
house is very Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
and
I don't think I ever thought about that until this go around.
And and I was thinking about, remember they had to build this thing, right? So probably I was thinking, how would you make it that ugly? And I realized, if you took a bunch of sheetrock and spent a few minutes busting it up into little chunks and started throwing it all around the floor, you'd create an effect sort of like this. You could make a house look like it was crumbling, just probably with a couple good hunks of sheetrock and some dust, but and a lot of antlers apparently. But there's this scene, and I wanted to know if any of you got the same thing when the doctor is upstairs. Because towards the end of this, they go, we got to get to that house and see what's going on. I think Susan's there. The doctor goes upstairs, and then all of a sudden, you're looking from the ceiling, and the door opens up, and James Mason just comes out like a rocket. Wham! Did anybody think Leatherface on this scene?
Oh man, I didn't.
The whole scene in the house is so Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
When Leatherface comes out in Chainsaw, and it's just sort of all of a sudden, it's like it literally, door opens, here he is, wham! It was Hooper, doing this sort of, and it's the same thing that he does in Chainsaw, where he's at kind of a distance. So you watch it happen, and so I guess you kind of feel
even the way he
powerless.
introduces Barlow has that similar level of slow build up bombast.
Yes, right. Yes, that's right. He Hooper has this way of just suddenly just introducing, basically just suddenly having things show up that are terrifying. In fact, Julia gasped out loud. And I was shaken by the scene where the kids go walking, and this is before any vampires have shown up. The kids go walking through the woods like dumbasses. I don't know what compelled them to do that.
Jason goes, that's weird that they have to go. So I'm like, I can't believe they have to go through the woods to get to their house. And I said, they don't have to. They're supposed to go on the streets. They're going through the woods because they want to, because they're idiots. And then sure enough, one of them goes, we shouldn't have taken that shortcut through the woods.
And then all of a sudden, out of the bottom of the frame comes this silhouette, that is a completely silly, like Colorform's silhouette. It just shows up, but it's terrifying. We both jumped at this silhouette that rises up, and that's the end of the first kid. Once people start dying in this movie, it's funny because the first, it's true, it's TV, it's 2 episodes of a miniseries. So for the first hour, probably, there's not much dying going on. There's just a bunch of setup, and there's also terrifying George Zunza. But then all of a sudden, when people do start dying, they start dying fast. I mean, all of a sudden, there's a baby died. There's all this stuff happening off screen. A plague essentially falls upon Salem's Lot.
Yeah. Right, and that's what I don't like about this movie is that you've got all this stuff about the people and the relationships and everything, and then as soon as they start dying, all of a sudden it's like, oh, all these people die, and they don't even die, most of them, on screen. Most of it is off screen. Oh, we found so-and-so dead, and oh, this other person died too. But there's not, you don't get, I mean, I guess because they don't want to keep overplaying that floating vampires in the window thing. But it just feels like suddenly it's like, okay, everybody died, and we're not going to see that part because we were too busy dealing with Fred Willard and Boom Boom Bonnie and whatever. I don't know. And then we don't get any of the actual vampires, what they're like. And I mean, I would have really liked to have seen what they are like once they're vampires. Because I'm really curious. Are they like, Spike and Drusilla? Are they like Susan Sarandon in that movie we saw a couple weeks ago? I mean, what are they like in terms of? Because clearly they have personalities. Because we see Susan as a vampire at the end, to give away the end since we're past an hour anyway. We see Susan in her as kind of a seductive, I've been looking for you. I mean, I want us to be young forever together, and she's all seductive with her nighties. She looks like she's clearly been, well cut, so it's not like she's not a zombie. I mean, it's just
she's not rotting, right?
Yes, I'm just really curious, like about these, like what their vampire life is like when they're after they've become vampires.
I
Like,
think,
we don't
I
get to see
think
any of
that must have been a deliberate choice, though, because I mean, in so many vampire movies, you get so much of.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I guess the focal point would be like Dracula movies, but you get so much of the vampires as characters that it kind of nullifies them as a scary thing because you just start to think of them as people.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying either way is wrong because there's
their
been
world
great
is lost.
things that,
I mean, their world is invisible to us. You don't. So the major vampires we should talk about here.
I think that was a choice. I mean, I think they were like, okay, all of that happens off screen because this is about the people who are having to deal with this problem, and these aren't superheroes. These aren't, this isn't Buffy. This isn't Blade. This is normal people in this small town, and we have to see how they're going to deal with this.
I was fascinated by. It's almost as though the vampires in this story have a couple of days where their eyes aren't open, in a sense, in a kitten kind of way. In other words, when they first show up, they seem to be really, really non-rational. They're just attracted to former family and whatever, But when 2 years later Susan shows up, she's pretty rational because she's giving Ben the whole line about how much better life will be if he becomes a vampire, and she's got it together. And so, assuming that they are not differently vampirized, although that's possible, I can only get the impression that they get smarter as they go along, that their personality sort of manifests.
Well, Barlow, I mean, he doesn't seem stupid. He's obviously got a
Yeah, let's talk about Barlow. Okay.
Barlow is like a force. Barlow is like a hurricane.
Yeah.
Yes. God. Barlow is, forget the Barlow in the book. This is the one place where the movie is different from the book. In the book, Barlow's literally Dracula. Stephen King wanted to do Dracula. He's just literally an urbane European. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But you've already got James Mason, so you didn't need that character, really. This guy is fascinating. You've got James Mason, the urbane character, who is protecting this crazy, giant, rat-like maniac. It's brilliant. I mean, that's so clever because, he looks like a monster, and yet he's not an idiot. Barlow's smart. Barlow can use his telekinesis to unlock doors and, to bash people's heads together. I mean, this is a terrifying guy, and it's so funny that he looks so much like Nosferatu. Go ahead.
There, to this day, you can still see. There's a Halloween mask that was made. I think it's a Don Post mask, but that's done off of Barlow. And I remember when I worked at a haunted house a few years back, got into debate because they were like, "Oh, it's a Nosferatu mask." I was like, "No, man, that's Barlow." And I was like, "How do you know?" I was like, "Because it's blue."
Because it's blue.
Nosferatu's not blue. Barlow is blue.
Oh yeah.
And I love how they love to shove him at the camera, just full on rah.
Yeah.
Barlow in your face. It's just
by the way, this is Reggie Nalder.
Crazy.
This is the guy who was he's the wraith. I mean, he's the ghoul in Zoltan, Hound of Dracula. The guy who comes and brings Zoltan, the really rather cute dog, back to life. I can't remember why, to do Dracula's bidding, I guess. But
Adam in the chat room has a point where he says that he felt like this was the only vampire film where Renfield was actually just trying to keep Dracula kind of caged, like keep him in check. Hey man, there's a real, there's a world I have to deal with.
Yes.
You can do your animal thing, and that's fine. But we actually kind of wanted to maybe stay in this town or whatever town, or
I think their whole scheme was, at least the way I used to imagine it when I was a kid. I have no idea if this was Stephen King or Tobe Hooper's frame of thought, but I always used to imagine that they wanted to establish like a town of vampires.
Yeah,
we're just going to be all these vampires hanging out.
I would agree. Yeah, Vampireville. Who wouldn't? And you could also antiques.
I think
night,
so. So I think that's sort of what happens. But I think that I really, to go back to what Tony was just saying and what Adam, who I is actually our former bandmate Adam, who's actually shown up a couple times on the show, but is over in the chat room right now. Remember what I said about how James Mason seems to look like he's dealing with nuclear fuel, like he's like he really wants to make sure things don't blow up. It just now occurred to me when you guys said that when he says, please padlock the outside of everything, but leave the keys for me, it's because he expects to get those keys, and he figures that Barlow is going to have some trouble with the locks. That he really, I agree. I think he wants to keep feeding Barlow. He wants to keep serving Barlow. That's probably the meaning of his life right now. But I don't think he wants to destroy the town. I think he's really just trying to keep it under control. It's kind of neat. There's a lot more here. I'm glad they don't get into it. It's more fun to think about.
James Mason does a lot of acting with his face. Like the scene where he sees the locks on the ground. Like he looks legitimately worried, which is why I've always felt like Straker is terrified of Barlow. Yeah. And Barlow is, you're right, he's an atom bomb, He's an earthquake. And once he's loose, he's wreaking havoc, and he's great.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
I like also Straker, he's just so good. Like, James Mason's just so good. In fact, if I remember correctly, there was a James Mason question, and don't quote me on this, but I seem to remember there was a James Mason question on one of the Button-Umathon applications, and I'm pretty sure they said, what was one of your favorites, or if not your favorite, and I think I used this one because he's just so awesome. Like when he's being questioned by the sheriff.
Yes.
And they both kind of know what's going on. And he's like, well, what should I do? Oh, and their interplay of like, I'm accusing you because you're new. And he goes, oh, hey, are you accusing me because I'm new?
Yes.
And let's just get that out. Let's not dance around. But then he dances around about a lot of other things. And all of that
very good.
is so good. Oh, man. Just eventually the sheriff just goes, screw this town.
Yes.
Here's a gun. That's awesome.
By the end,
like deserting the town, and he has a vested interest in staying there. Things have gotten really bad.
Yeah. I think that's the first smart thing that anybody in that town did, actually, was take off.
That's true, but I love how he is. He's like, but you can't, you got to stay here. He's like, well, here's a gun. You do whatever you want to do with that.
Yeah,
Go crazy,
I'm not a captain
David
of a
Soul
ship.
hero, man.
That was good.
Well, you notice George Zunza left, by the way, leading one to wonder, why did we get that whole storyline? I don't know exactly. I mean,
guess.
Willard gets killed. Fred Willard gets killed by James Mason. I guess.
I think that they should have cut that whole storyline for time. Or maybe they did in the 90-minute version. I don't know. Maybe we don't get Boom Boom Bunny.
No, because in the 90-minute version, it just gets more violent when George Zunza confronts Willard. I keep calling him Willard. He's called. Now I literally can't remember the name of the character that he plays. Crockett, something like that. Anyway, I can't forget Boom Boom Bonnie though.
Yeah, Larry Crockett.
Satin,
Larry Crockett.
Like short set. I like that her, maybe it's just for TV purposes, but her,
yes.
Hey, this is really sexy. Looks like something out of a roller disco.
Yes.
As opposed to
and Fred Willard has those little blue satin soccer shorts, and George Zunza goes, you must really like those things to keep them on. And I was thinking, no, he's on TV. That's why he keeps them on.
Yeah. But it is awesome.
Yeah, so let's see. Okay, one more thing that I wanted to mention, and then we've totally got to wrap it up because as always, we run long. We say this is a 60-minute show that is probably consistently 90 minutes long. But
it's the longest 60-minute show, or the shortest 90-minute show. It's both
Jeff Lewis. All right, Jeffrey Lewis, like I said, the town's handyman, when he shows up, when he's been vampirized, he shows up in the teacher's house because Ben makes friends with his old friend, a teacher who he has in common with the kid, Mark, is also in the same drama class that Ben was in. Anyway, the drama teacher is alone at night, and he hears this creaking, this rocking, and he goes down the hall, and he opens up the door, and there's the handyman rocking back and forth in a rocking chair in his house. And let me tell you, that was scary. That was incredibly scary to me.
Oh, man.
Imagine, if you will, your house, your apartment, your whatever, and you hear a noise and you walk in, and there's an intruder, and he's not running after you, he's not rifling through your some drawers in somewhere. No. He's sitting in a rocking chair staring at you.
Well, yeah, he's also, at that point, he's like, I've been here a while, rocking. I might stay a little while longer.
Yes.
I don't know how long I'll stay, but I'm pretty comfortable here. So I'm going to make you really uncomfortable at how comfortable I am in your own house, which is always like. And then when he looks up and there's the reflective contacts, oh man, holy cow, that is creep factor.
Jeffrey Lewis is so good. I'm amazed at this guy. He played the mysterious piano player on Flo's Yellow Rose. I'm trying to think what else I've seen this actor in.
Everything. Like, he's just in so much stuff from the time.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah,
it's
basically
awesome.
He's just there all the time.
And by the way, also, it's so weird because George Zunza, like, he reached an age and then he just stopped. Like, I was looking at all the movies and I'm like, oh, man. And then he got to the age he is here. And that's where he stayed. It's really weird. Maybe
George Zunza is a vampire. I mean,
maybe he could join maybe he's in Vampire co-joined with Isabella Johnny, who never seems to age.
Right.
And and their leak is this weird Barlow type Nosferatu guy, because there's a Nosferatu between the two of them. Maybe.
I was just looking at
if we
Jeffrey Lewis
and there's rocking chair people in our houses because we've discovered the secret conspiracy. You guys come send some people after us with stakes, because you know what happened.
I'm always worried that we're going to actually wind up exposing things that we shouldn't expose. Jeff Lewis.
That way.
It looks like he made I can't even count it. It's like 500 million movies. He's even in a movie in 2012 called Retreat. And, I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is Juliette Lewis's dad. This is Juliette Lewis's father, which blows my mind that I don't think I was ever aware that Juliette Lewis was a Hollywood kid,
although they do kind of look alike.
Yeah. It never dawned on me. I mean, first of all, nobody looks like Jeffrey Lewis. I mean, he's 77 years old right now, so he's somewhere in his 40s, I guess, when this movie was made. He's just fantastic. So let's see. We should probably wrap this up. I mean, I want to do final thoughts. We could go on forever. This is just like Cabin in the Woods. We could keep talking about Salem's Lot, but I think we hit on everything that we want to hit on. The small town, the characters, the nature of the vampires.
These are themes we're going to revisit while going through the Stephen King.
Yeah,
that's absolutely right. We're probably even going to do Salem's Lot again. I think it might be a good idea to return to Salem's Lot. Not doing the Return to Salem's Lot, which I understand is a terrible, terrible movie, but maybe doing the 2004 Salem's Lot. We just have to decide that whether to go there. But we'll be in in Stephen King universe for a while. So let's get final thoughts, and then we'll come around again and do endorsements, and we'll do it backwards. Earlier we did Tony, Julia, Drew. So let's do Drew, Julia, Tony, and then I'll wrap it up. Drew, final thoughts, Salem's Lot.
Like I said earlier, yes, I could get all objective and talk about the flaws that are there. But I don't want to, because I really like this movie and it makes me happy. So there you go. I love Salem's Lot.
A lot. You sound like you're saying, I love this woman. Okay.
I love my dead gay son.
Julia, final thoughts on Salem's Lot?
Well, aside from I love my dead gay son, for some reason every time I heard you talk about Susan, I thought about that movie, Monsters vs. Aliens. It's like, Susan. Ooh, I scared myself. Anyway, I don't know. Like I said, there's a couple of terrifying, creepy moments, but, and I think Drew gave me something to think about as far as the idea that this movie is not supposed to be about the vampires, it's supposed to be about what happens in this town. But if that's the case, then I feel like it falls short in exploring the emotions of the people in the town then. I just feel like that there needed to be more depth to some characters. Whether it was the human ones or the vampire ones, I would have been okay with either. But other than that, I think I think there's some good stuff in it and some good creepiness. But it kind of falls short for me.
Tony, what are your so that was I love it. There's a falls short for me. Tony, what are your final thoughts on?
I really dig it. Again, as a Stephen King fan, watching an adaptation that's really close, considering there's many that aren't, is still really cool. I mean, it does suffer from some of the things they had to do that are very TV in '79. Like, there's just no other way to describe it. And people see
when
it
you
now
say that,
like,
give me a for instance. Well,
there's some of those holds where they'll just hold on something, go da-na, and that was a really typical, like, they'll hold to get out to a commercial.
Yes.
There's some zooms that are very TV, like, and the soundtrack's really weird. It was the last thing the guy who did the soundtrack. It was the last thing he did, according to IMDb. There's weird stuff in the soundtrack. Like, there's one that has, like, these weird, like, it's like bees as an undertone, and, like, all this really kind of different for a TV soundtrack kind of stuff going on, which I thought was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's just stuff that unless you were watching TV, then it kind of, I bet it's really jarring if you were, to somebody who's not of our, same age. Like, if you just picked it up now and you're used to kind of more sophisticated stuff or just different stuff, I'm not sure sophisticated is right. Maybe
well, I mean, truly, like, everything cuts for commercials. I mean,
the way it cuts for commercials is, it's so typical of how that was done. It was just the way you did it,
Yeah.
The way it goes to, it doesn't have a bumper, but also just little things where they would hold on a scene and then maybe zoom into that hold, and just stuff that you see that if, out of context of that time period, you're like, wow, that's kind of weird. Mm-hmm. I don't know, why did they do that, That's
a really interesting point. I would love to have, none of us is quite young enough not to be part of the generation that had a lot of commercial television without as much cable. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, so it would be interesting to hear somebody like much younger saying, I didn't understand, why did it go black every 15 minutes? What's that about?
Jamie, who is younger than me, did actually have a lot of reactions like that. So you are not wrong.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, we accept it because we knew how it was.
Yes.
But when you look at how things are cut now.
And frankly, you're just thankful you don't have to watch the commercial. Although I would have liked to have seen, if somebody had figured out how to give me a package of like 5 minutes of 1979 commercials, I think I would probably dig that. I mean, that would
true.
be neat. I mean, I'd love to see like cuts to like whatever movies they're advertising at this point and so forth. Okay, so my final thoughts on Salem's Lot, kicking off the Stephen King retrospective. This is going to be one of the best retrospectives we have done. I know it. I feel it in my bones. I think even when we do a bad one, it's going to be a good one. I'm excited. But the thing is, I love Stephen King books, and I have a strange softness in my heart for Stephen King adaptations because I love the coziness of his small towns and his characters and everything. So even when it's bad, there's just a certain cherishable goodness to it, just like It, which I know we're going to do, has that same feel. Like, oh, here's the cozy town, and here's our friends. You feel quite safe watching these things. It's not quite like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you really begin to worry that the world has no soul. Stephen King really maintains, even though he shows us so much darkness, he maintains this great feeling that there is goodness in the world. It doesn't always win. The bad side wins often, but there's a cozy goodness. I love this movie. I know it has flaws. I think my favorite thing about it, watching it this time, was realizing just how dangerous Barlow is and how much trouble James Mason is going through to sort of continue to feed this creature and yet also keep it from, destroying the world and I guess presumably so that he would have to keep moving. So, and I really enjoyed seeing David Soul. I thought he was good at playing, a writer. And I was going to say, if I were, if I were a much more awesome version of myself, I think I would be happy to be the David Soul version. That would rock. Okay, so let's do endorsements, and we'll go backwards from the way we came. Endorsement that I want to bring out this week, I got this awesome book called Silhouettes from Popular Culture, which we were having so much fun looking at. It is just a crazy book by Ollie Moss, and it's all silhouettes, like you would see of your grandmother, except for the differences. I'm looking right now at a silhouette of Edward Scissorhands and a silhouette of Lady and the Tramp and a silhouette of Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator across from a silhouette of Arnold Schwarzenegger as Conan. This is great stuff. So I recommend that you at least check out Silhouettes from Popular Culture. This is really, it's a neat piece that we had a lot of fun playing with earlier today. Which way did we go? Tony. Back to Tony. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm sure there's a horror movie I've seen. I'm still actually reeling from Fantastic Fest. Outside of horror, I'm extremely sad. I have two things. A, I'm sad that Judge Dredd did so poorly. And I really, really think if you're an action movie fan, and a lot of horror movie fans are also action movie fans, please, if you get a chance, go see the Dredd movie. They did everything to me as a comic book fan right. Well, maybe not everything, but close enough. Everything right for their budget that they had. Unfortunately, everybody I talk to goes, why'd they remake that crappy Stallone movie? Because marketing really just dropped the ball. They didn't say, hey, not based on that. In fact, based on a comic that's been around for years and years and years and is really cool and satirical, and this is a hard R action movie. It's badass, and that never happened. And I nobody believes me, it seems like, outside of the people who were at Fantastic Fest, maybe, and a lot of the people who are tweeting, Harry Knowles' Twitter feed is full of people going, holy crap, I checked out Dredd. You were so right. Why didn't I see this? And, it's not a perfect movie, but, everybody says, oh, it's just all Hollywood remakes. It's all it's all sequels. It's all this and that. And, all these PG-13 movies. And yet we get this awesome action movie, like the Raid on, sci-fi version of the Raid, which people seem to like. And nobody goes to see it because marketing dropped the ball. And that saddens me. I mean, there's only one Draft House that's showing it right now in Austin. And
it's strange how it disappeared.
No, because it's a lot of the things that everybody rails about not getting these days, and that we miss, and not being PC, and showing bullets ripping through people and stuff, and not to say that that's for everyone, but for action movie fans who want that, here's a movie that is, and we probably won't get another one. So that kind of sucks. And
don't discount word of mouth. I mean,
I'm hoping that
Cabin in the Woods was not a huge box office hit until people started. It was a gradual build. People kept talking.
But it's out of theaters. I mean, it did not stick around. Cabin in the Woods had some staying power. Dredd is out. Like,
Yeah.
I was sad when I was like, man, I got to go get some people together, and we're going to throw some money at this, because I saw it during Fantastic Fest, so, you know, I didn't pay, I mean, I paid my ticket, but, you know, I didn't pay full price at a theater. And now I wish I would have seen it like twice in that weekend, so I could have just, you know.
Well,
maybe
look,
would have
Tony,
helped
you're
us,
right.
you know.
When a studio decides, you know, that they're not going to put their back behind a movie, the rest of us miss it. We don't know. You know, we literally don't know, and that can be really, really sad because to some extent, I you know, I consider myself semi-independent, right? But the fact of the matter is, I take cues about what to watch, what not to watch from what other people have told me they've seen, and you know, I felt that way about Dark Shadows. I thought Dark Shadows was really good, but the word of mouth.
I'm still on that looks terrible to me, but however, I'm telling you now.
Maybe it was just marketed wrong, because I'm with Tony. Like, Dark Shadows looked abysmal, and I wanted to like that movie because I thought the stills, when it was just stills in still pictures in Fangoria, I thought it was
disappoint
great.
you when you watched it, or did you have you watched it yet? Or
I haven't seen it yet. It's coming out on DVD this week, and I'll probably rent it.
By the way,
so
Frank and
I believe
Weenie
there's hype against it.
Frank and Weenie, by the way, Return to Form, awesome movie. So if you've been on the fence, if you've been burned by Tim Burton before, Frank and Weenie brings it back around. And I do not. This is not just because I like, you know, Nightmare Before Christmas or any of that. This is actually like from a fan who's been a fan a long time, has been disappointed, and then had to go, awesome, please stay there. Wherever you're at now with Frank and Weenie, keep making that, because, you know, making those. Truly
loved Dark Shadows more than Nightmare Before Christmas. I actually really loved the Dark Shadows
I'll
movie.
see it, but I'm only because we're good friends.
Yeah, look, it's lonely. I was probably the only guy in the country who really enjoyed that movie, and maybe, so, I don't know. I refuse to believe I'm wrong. I think it just happened that way, you know.
Jason, don't feel bad. I was the only person that was madly in love with the remake of The Wolfman. So it's
See, there you go. These things happen.
So Dread, and then also through the podcast today we met Mark, who is in a band in Australia called Psychonaut, and I'll put up the link, you know, later on.
Yeah.
And said, hey, he wrote us and said, hey, we do this music that's based on horror movies, and it's cool. Like, I like where it's coming from. It's not as bombastic orchestral stuff as like Powerwolf, that firmly has tongue-in-cheek kind of singing about werewolves and popes and everything and evil. It's different kind of, it's hard to describe. It has a lot of thrash elements I like, and a lot of cool metal stuff in it. I really like. I was like, yeah, I'll check it out, and then ended up listening to it for a good part of the day. So I'll definitely
this is metal that's all named after horror movies, right? I mean, they have like, wasn't one of the songs like Lemmy Frankenstein or something like that?
Yeah, there's werewolf, and you know, it's good stuff. We'll post their links because it's cool stuff, and they're all over the place, and makes me wanna try to get a gig and somehow Desert to Mars, fly to Australia and play with these guys, because it's cool stuff, and it appeals definitely to all the metal stuff I like and all of the horror stuff I like, kind of in a pretty awesome package with some really good musicianship. So we'll be posting their stuff. And, you know, again, if anybody gets in contact with us, if we dig it, then, you know, we'll put it up. I'm not, you know, like-minded individual. That's what the Internet's about. You find stuff and you go, hey, wow, I didn't even know about this, and now I can listen to cool music or watch this movie I missed or whatever. I think that's the coolest part of doing something like this is, you know, you reach out to people and they reach out and go, hey, here's something else that's cool, and you keep that going. I think that's pretty awesome.
Outstanding.
So, anyway.
That was really great. I was really glad that we heard from those guys.
That's my long-winded endorsement. Sorry to take up so much time.
No, it's fantastic. So we did I went first, right? And then it was Tony. So did we do Julia?
No, I mean, I think last week I just mentioned briefly that Hotel Transylvania was really fun, and I didn't really talk about it. But it's just so cute. It's such a fun movie about the same stuff that we do our horror movies about, which is the vampire and the monsters. It's the flip side of like the horror. It's where they're actually afraid of people, or they feel like they have such a bad reputation, and so they need an escape. So it's just this hotel place for monsters to go where there won't be any humans to bother them or anything like that. It's a really sweet family movie. So if you have kids that you want to expose to Dracula but not scare the living daylights out of them, this is a good way to do it.
It is really good. I saw it this past Saturday, a week after Julia saw it, and I just loved it.
I'm looking forward to that. Actually, I heard really good things. So.
Oh, it's lovely. Drew, any endorsements?
Yeah, two things. First off, continuing kind of my rock and roll theme from last week, plus the birthday present theme. As anybody who has known me for any considerable length of time, they will tell you that my all-time favorite band is the Ramones, and thusly I got a lot of books that have been put out over the last few years about the Ramones. In particular, and this is appropriate because, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, it is in fact Johnny Ramone's birthday. One of them was Commando, Johnny Ramone's autobiography that it was completed after he died, but it's very, very revealing, and if you're even just slightly interested in either guitar or the early days of punk rock, or just what it would be like to be on tour in a band as much as these guys are out on tour. It's a fascinating read about one of rock's truly eccentric and offbeat figures, and it's just like a Ramones song. It's short, sweet, and to the point, and I just tore through it in about a day.
Oh, man.
And now I'm actually, it's great. And now I'm on to another book, which might end up being next week's endorsement. We'll see. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is that on Indie Planet Digital, we now have 4 full Halloween Man trade paperbacks up for digital download. You can get them on your Kindle or your iPhone or whatever doodad that you have going on. And most of those are very reasonably priced. Actually, all of them are very reasonably priced. The most expensive one is $1.50. Most of them are 99 cents. And right now, all through the month of October, you can download Halloween Man versus the Invisible Man for free. So please go to Indie Planet Digital and download those.
Awesome.
That is a great story.
I fully endorse Drew, not just because he's a friend and we have him on the podcast, but because I like his comics. Like I would read these comics if I didn't know Drew, and that's not. You can't say that with all of your friends.
I did read those comics when I didn't know Drew, and
there you go.
Halloween Man is fantastic, and Halloween Man meets the Invisible Man. That one, of course, I read years after knowing Drew, but it is really lovely, and that's a good story. That's a really enjoyable story where Halloween Man gets hired to come and check out these crimes that are taking place in the leather community in his sort of this alternate monster world, and it's really good stuff. I was really impressed.
Yeah,
well, thank you.
Yeah, so that's our endorsements, and that's our talk about Salem's Lot, and this has been the first episode of the Stephen King retrospective of the Castle Dracula podcast. I don't know exactly where we're going to go next, although I have a feeling it's The Shining. We're going to figure that out in a couple days. But thank you so much. As always, please like us on Facebook, send links out, tell your friends, bring more people, because the only way we're going to be able to keep doing this month after month is if we just keep growing it. And we are growing, but I want more listeners. I want to rule the world. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you next Monday night. Ciao.
Good night.
Later.
Bye.